Good Thursday morning, and thanks for joining us from the Ohio AgNet Voice You Know with the News You Trust studio, sponsored by Grain Equipment Company, where innovation meets execution. I'm Dusty Sonnenberg. Well, happy Thanksgiving. Taking a look outside, 37 degrees on the barn thermometer right now. Cloudy skies out there. One of the warmer mornings we're going to have compared to what we have coming up the rest of the week, going into the weekend and even early next week. Definitely a colder feel in the air. This quick programming note, be sure to tune in on Monday as we get an update from the Ohio Corn and Wheat Growers Association. Then on Tuesday during midday, Dale will be visiting with this year's winning county fair in the Farm Credit Mid-America Feed the Hungry, Stock the Trailer contest. Well, let's check in now on our weekly update from the Ohio Soybean Council. I'm visiting today with Dr. Laura Lindsay, OSU Extension soybean and small grain specialist. Dr. Lindsay, it's that time of year where harvest is wrapped up and we have the results in from the soybean performance trials. Before we talk numbers, let's talk about the growing season, though. Sort of an interesting year right from the time we started trying to put seed in the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I was afraid this year was going to be 2019. If you remember 2019, it was extremely wet. And so Northwest Ohio in particular, we had fairly late planting dates, later than we wanted because it was so wet. And I was concerned, we're looking at 2019. But our 2019 pivoted into a 2012 where we had very dry conditions later in the year.
Now, definitely, as we take a look, different outcomes from what we saw a year ago. Did the season seem to correct itself across the state, or was it just sort of hit and miss?
Our yields were very, very variable this year. I was surprised our northern locations yielded a little bit lower than I expected. We were in the high 40s to high 50s in our performance trials in Henry and Sandusky County. And since the drought came in later up there, I thought yields would be higher. But then, I forgot how wet it was early on. So I think that wet early season followed by dry later really took a toll on the soybeans. In northern Ohio, our more southern areas, and we're in Preble and Clinton County, so not in the heart of where the drought was at, were surprisingly good. In Preble, Clinton County, we were averaging mid to high 70s in our performance trials.
Well, let's talk more specific numbers at some of the different locations you had.
Yeah, so our highest average yield was actually in Licking County this year. So our late variety trial, so late relative maturities, yielded an average of 85 bushels per acre. And then in our early trial, we actually had one variety that yielded 101 bushels per acre.
Wow.
Which is remarkable. Yes.
Absolutely is. Well, what about on the other end then, when we saw, you said, some lower numbers to the north? How did that fare out?
Yeah, so our average in Sandusky County for our early relative maturities was 38 bushels. So that's a pretty big swing, going to our lowest 38 average to our highest average, which was 85 in Licking.
So all these results have been posted at ohioagnet.com, and obviously you've also had them available through the Corn newsletter. As folks take a look at this, obviously more data is good to have, but looking at some of these numbers, some of, I don't want to say outliers, but compared to last year where we had extremely high numbers, what would you say maybe some of the takeaways should be?
Yeah, it's always good to look at multiple years in multiple locations if possible. So we want to see a variety that yields consistently high. So it's good to compare multiple years when available and multiple locations with our data and other data as well. So there's a lot of information from companies. So getting as much information as possible as a farmer is always important.
Great information and a great data again for everyone to look at as far as how the different varieties performed all across the state in different locations. My guest again today, Dr. Laura Lindsay, OSU Extension State Soybean and Small Grain Specialist. Dr. Lindsay, thanks so much for all your work.
Yep, thank you.
And this weekly update brought to you by the Ohio Soybean Council and Soybean Checkoff. Let's take a look now at that Thanksgiving Day morning weather forecast brought to us by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com.
Got a little moisture as we get started with your Thanksgiving, but we should see an improving weather pattern here nearby. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin. Let's take a look at that Ohio Ag Weather Update. First of all, happy Thanksgiving. We have plenty to be thankful for. I personally have a lot, and I know you do too. Enjoy yourself today. Eat good, and if you're traveling here, take a a look at the weather this morning. We had a weather system come through overnight, and we're still dealing with the remains of it here today. Probably going to see this linger into early afternoon in eastern parts of the state, improving everywhere else. Moisture, rain, and some wet snow. We have had some minor accumulations up to this point. I think as you get closer to the lake shores here over the next few days, that's where the snow of significance will be. But just keep an eye out this morning. Once again, seeing things improve quickly this afternoon. Maybe not seeing a lot of sunshine, but precipitation is done relatively quick. Bitter cold air comes in behind this weather system, though. Strong north and northwest winds are dominating through the balance of late afternoon and evening today through tomorrow, the weekend, and honestly most of next week. That's going to put lake effect in play. Issue 1 on lake effect, clouds. I think we'll see clouds off and on, and that can happen for the entire state with these strong winds. Issue 2, lake effect snow. Now that's going to be a little bit more hit and miss. You definitely get close to the Lake Erie shoreline in northeastern parts of Ohio. Yep, that's where we can see the accumulations. But flurries, you know what, in this cold air mass, I'm not going to rule them out anywhere from this weekend into early next week. I don't think it's enough to really cause problems with travel, the flurries at least, but it is something that we're going to be stuck with. Temperatures way below normal. 20s for highs, teens, maybe even single digits for lows here off and on until we see temperatures moderate late next week, and even then, it's ever so briefly. Happy Thanksgiving again. I'm Ryan Martin.
Thanks, Ryan. Let's check in now with Dale Minio as he brings us another industry update from his recent trip to the National Farm Broadcasting Convention.
Joining me is Eric Ott with Valent USA. Eric, nice to catch up with you.
With the trend of planting earlier and planting into cover crops, that leaves a potential green bridge for diseases as well as insect pests. And one of the ways to think about managing things is using a high-quality seed treatment like Intego Sweet Soybean, which provides protection against many Pythium species, Phytophthora, Rhizoctonia fusarium, as well as several insect pests that are seed corn maggot, grubs, and aphids, and bean leaf beetle.
How about SCN? That seems to, we continue to hear about the yield-robbing SCN that some people, I guess you wouldn't know you had unless you're actually doing the soil sample and getting a count. And that's the name of the game. If you got it, you got to treat it, you got to rotate it. What are your choices?
Right. So, SCN, the invisible yield robber that robs a lot of yield that ends up being attributed to a lot of other things during the growing season. And with some of these populations of SCN overcoming some of the bred-in genetic resistance, we need to think about managing those a lot more. And Aveo EZ nematicide, which is a biological nematicide, is a good component of a SCN management program.
Say the name of that again for the guys that we've spurred interest. We want to make sure they get that so they can check it out more completely.
Aveo EZ nematicide.
There you go. I've been visiting with Eric Ott from Valent.
Thank you. And if you have any more questions and comments, please visit valent.com or your local retailer.
And to hear the full interview, visit the feature audio post at ohioagnet.com. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more after this.
Since 1926, Nationwide has been rooted in agriculture. Founded as the Farm Bureau Mutual Automobile Insurance Company with a mission to protect farmers and their communities, we honor our legacy by offering solutions that evolve with the complex needs of today's farms. As the leading insurer of America's farms and trusted by 8 farm bureaus for 100 years and counting, Nationwide is on your side. Number 1 insurer based on 2023 direct written premium per AM Best. Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates, Columbus, Ohio.
Dogs making agricultural news, in particular the Beagle Brigade. Now, the U.S. Senate unanimously passed the bipartisan Beagle Brigade Act to provide statutory authorization and reliable funding to the National Detector Dog Training Center that's located in Nuan, Georgia. The legislation led by Senators Joni Ernst and Raphael Warnock helped support the training of specialized groups of canine units stationed at airports and ports of entry to prevent the spread of foreign animal disease. The Beagle Brigade has been protecting American agriculture at ports since 1984, and led by U.S. Customs and Border Protection agricultural specialists, these dogs help detect harmful pests, harmful plants, and foreign animal diseases in luggage, carry-ons, and cargo from other countries. The National Pork Producers Council President Lori Stevemeyer, a pork producer from Easton, Minnesota, said the American agriculture relies on the National Detector Dog Training Center to prevent the introduction of foreign animal and plant diseases that would cripple our food supply. For the pork industry, the Beagle Brigade is the first line of defense for keeping threats from foreign animal diseases like the African swine fever out of the United States. They're urging the House to take up this bill before the end of the year. Now, once a dog shows signs, it will work at the USDA training facility in Georgia. Then a handler is matched to the canine and more training takes place. A new handler needs a 10 to 12-week course, and once the handler knows the system, the handler trains for just 4 weeks if the person is matched with the new dog. Now, the dogs are trained to find items that can bring disease in, even if they're vacuum sealed. Dogs smell in layers, and they find what they are taught to search for. For example, people will try to disguise something like mango in coffee, but these dogs will still find the mango. We need all hands or paws, as they say, on deck to keep our agricultural community safe from foreign animal diseases like avian influenza, foot and mouth disease, and African swine fever. The Beagle Brigade is essential to sniffing out items that may harbor these threats, stopping them in their tracks before they can endanger our farms and food supply. As this bipartisan legislation moves forward, we can better support another critical line of defense against harmful diseases, pests, and plants, offering our farmers peace of mind as they work to protect their livestock and their livelihoods, said Senator Ernst. Now, Senator Warnock agreed the legislation will help strengthen the nation's agriculture industry as well as U.S. communities. As a member of the Senate Ag Committee and champion for Georgia farmers, he's proud to have worked with Senator Ernst to get the bipartisan legislation passed through the Senate and one step closer to becoming law. Stay tuned. We'll be back to take a look at your markets after this.
Diane from Michigan, a disabled senior citizen trying to get by. Henry from Florida, a veteran fighting to make ends meet. Elena from Arizona, a mother struggling to feed her daughter. Hi, I'm Connie Britton, and I support Feeding America because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year, like Diane, Henry, and Elena. Learn more at feedingamerica.org. Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
It's time now for your morning Louis Dreyfus grain analysis, brought to you by the Ohio Soybean Council and your soybean checkoff. Let's check in with Ryan Martin.
Grain markets went into the Thanksgiving holiday on a mixed to mostly lower note. We finished lower on corn and wheat on Wednesday, double-digit losses on some of the hard wheats. And we did see a slight bump in beans, although low-volume trade is what we saw through most of Wednesday. Just remember, markets closed for Thanksgiving through the day. There will be no overnight session Thanksgiving night, and the markets will open in the morning on Friday before settling down at noon Central Time, 1 p.m. local time. So it's going to be a shortened trading week here. We do not expect large volume in on Friday. As a matter of fact, I just don't think much happens on Friday. But remember, low-volume trade sometimes can be highly volatile trade. We will see. On Wednesday, the futures were sharply mixed and dropped going into the close based on fund-to-short covering for the most part. We did see that help with soybeans and soybean meal, but the oil was dropping on some export issues. The weekly export sales report will be out on Friday. The dollar was in decline on Wednesday. Traders taking profit overall. The President Trump tariff pledges that were out this week also continue to have an impact in the marketplace overall. Argentina's wheat, well, that's going to be the main story. That's the reason why we saw wheat lower and the double-digit losses on the hard wheat. Argentina's wheat on Wednesday continued to move lower in terms of price. Argentina wheat is the cheapest in the world by far, really glaringly cheaper than the Black Sea area, which was cheaper than ours. So we've got some issues here in order to get some product to move. Registration for first notice day on December futures, 114 contracts of corn, 369 contracts of soy oil, 76 contracts of soy meal. Not much to read into that, but as we look at managed money, they bought about 2,900 contracts of corn and 4,800 contracts of beans on Wednesday, sold 4,600 contracts of wheat. I'm Ryan Martin.
Thanks, Ryan. Let's take a look at how your markets closed, brought to us by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. March corn closed unchanged, and May corn was unchanged as well, while January soybeans closed up 5 1/4 cents, and March soybeans were up 3 cents. March Kansas City wheat closed down 14 1/4, while March Chicago wheat was down 9 1/2 cents, and March Minneapolis wheat was down 9 1/4 cents. Now, with the Thanksgiving holiday, there is no overnight trade, but again, looking at yesterday's closing numbers, December corn was down 4 1/4 cents at $4.15 3/4, while March corn was unchanged at $4.28. January soybeans closed up 5 1/4 cents at $9.88 3/4, with March beans up by 3 at $9.97, and wheat for December was down 1 3/4 at $5.37 3/4. Happy Thanksgiving. This is the Ohio AgNet.